You don't have a bad memory. You've just been taught the wrong way to memorize. You read something, you repeat it, you go over it again and again. It starts to feel familiar, like you understand it, like you remember it. But later, it's gone. And you think, why can't I memorize anything? This happens in so many situations. Maybe you're studying for an exam, reading a textbook, or trying to learn a new language. You spend hours reviewing, highlighting, and rereading, only to find that when it comes time to actually use that information, your mind goes blank. Perhaps you've tried to remember a new client's name, a list of ingredients for a recipe, or even the steps to a new dance move. You feel like you've got it, but when the moment of truth arrives, the information just isn't there. This isn't a personal failing. It's a common pitfall of how we approach learning. We often mistake the feeling of recognition for actual retention, leading to a cycle of frustration and perceived inadequacy. Because repetition is not memory. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity feels like progress. But your brain is not storing the information, it's recognizing it. Recognition is easy. Memory is effort, and your brain avoids effort whenever it can. Think of it like this. If you keep looking at a map, you'll recognize the routes. But if you put the map away and try to navigate, that's when you truly learn the way. Your brain is wired for efficiency, and simply recognizing something requires less energy than actively recalling it. So it takes the path of least resistance, leading to that frustrating feeling of knowing something but not being able to retrieve it. This passive engagement tricks your brain into thinking it has mastered the material, when in reality, it has only become accustomed to seeing it. As psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus showed, memory fades quickly without active recall. Here's what's actually happening. When you reread something, your brain says, "I've seen this before." That creates confidence, but it's false confidence, because in a real situation, you don't have the page in front of you. You have to recall it. And if you never practiced recall, your brain doesn't know how to retrieve it. Think about trying to remember a new colleague's name. If you just hear it once and then see it written down repeatedly, you might recognize it. But if someone asks you their name a week later, you might struggle. Or imagine learning a new recipe. Reading it over and over might make it seem familiar, but can you cook it perfectly without looking at the instructions? Another common example is studying for a test by just highlighting your notes. You might feel like you know the material because you recognize the highlighted phrases, but when the test asks you to explain a concept in your own words, you draw a blank. Your brain hasn't built the retrieval pathways needed for true memory. It's like having a book in your library, but no catalog system to find it when you need it. At Daily Reset Lab, this channel breaks down the hidden psychological patterns behind how you study, think, and perform under pressure. If this feels familiar, you'll want to understand this next. Why students forget everything after exams. Now let's go deeper. Memory is built through effort, not repetition. The moment you struggle to remember something, that's when your brain strengthens the connection. That's when learning actually happens. But if you remove that effort, you remove the memory. This struggle is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of your brain actively working to forge stronger neural pathways. Each time you try to retrieve information and succeed, even if it's difficult, you're essentially reinforcing that memory. It's like building a muscle. You need to exert effort for it to grow stronger. Without that effort, the muscle atrophies and the memory fades. This is why passive review, like simply rereading, is so ineffective. It bypasses the very mechanism that builds lasting memory. The more you challenge your brain to retrieve information, the more robust and accessible that information becomes. So the solution is not repeating more, it's changing how you engage. Instead of rereading, close your notes. Ask yourself, what do I remember? Try to pull the information out, even if it's incomplete. Even if it feels uncomfortable, because that discomfort is what builds memory. Embrace that feeling of slight frustration, that moment where you're digging through your mental archives. That's your brain actively working, creating new connections, and solidifying the information. This active engagement transforms passive recognition into robust, retrievable memory. It's about shifting from being a passive consumer of information to an active participant in your own learning process. This deliberate effort signals to your brain that the information is important and worth retaining. You can keep this simple. Read once, then stop. Write down what you remember, or explain it out loud. That's how memory forms, not through repetition, but through retrieval. For example, after reading a chapter in a history book, instead of rereading it, try to summarize the main points in your own words without looking at the book. Or if you're learning a new language, don't just review flashcards. Try to have a short conversation or write a few sentences using the new vocabulary. Even trying to recall the key takeaways from a meeting without checking your notes is a form of active recall. When preparing for a presentation, instead of just reviewing your slides, try to deliver the presentation out loud without looking at your notes. If you're learning a new skill, like coding, don't just read the documentation. Try to write a small program from scratch, recalling the syntax and logic. These small, consistent acts of retrieval practice are far more powerful than hours of passive review, building a strong, accessible memory network. So the next time you feel like nothing is sticking, don't assume something is wrong with you. Nothing is broken. You've just been training your brain to recognize instead of remember. It's not a flaw in your intelligence or your memory capacity. It's a misunderstanding of how your brain actually learns and retains information. By understanding this fundamental principle and shifting your approach, you can unlock your true memory potential and make learning a much more effective and less frustrating experience. This reframe empowers you to take control of your learning journey, transforming perceived weaknesses into strengths through informed strategies. Subscribe to Daily Reset Lab for more perspective like this. And if you want to understand why memory disappears under pressure, watch Why Students Forget Everything After Exams.